Hang on. Have you done it? You did it.
Yeah, yeah,
You did it. I wasn't ready, but now it's too late.
that's right. We're recording. So, hi, Brian. Thanks so much for coming on my show. Uh,
My pleasure. I'm a big fan. I watched a bunch of the previous episodes. I've been looking
you,
forward to this. This is
you did
exciting.
actually. Okay, great. Which ones? Just got to figure.
The guy who is your friend and the guy who is your TA.
That's right. Well, I guess hopefully they're both friends. They're all friends so
Oh, well,
far.
I didn't mean to say anything about your relationship with your TA. I am
Yeah,
sure
yeah.
for now it's friendship.
That's right. Well, someday I'll manage to get people who are not my friends. That will be a big deal. But I don't know. Are we friends?
Yeah, we're friends. In this crazy world, what else would we be? We're
I
we're
think we
certainly
could be
not
friends.
acquaintances, right? We're friends.
We're acquainted. We sometimes talk. So, okay, why were you on my show? You are on my show because you are a professional novelist. You're someone I know who is making it with his creative talent. That's I think that's really great.
Yeah, thank you.
Uh,
It took a lot of years of failure and depression to get there. So I'm
well,
thrilled to be seeing.
I got that in my resume. Why am I not getting there? I'm wondering.
I
So,
think it's necessary but not sufficient. Is
oh
that the
yeah,
expression? I feel like
that
you
could be
need.
it.
Yeah, that's the problem.
So I want to talk to you about all that you do. So you have two published novels at
I
this
do.
point. Is that right?
I
I
do.
have one of them here. Your latest one, the Body Politic. I couldn't find your other one. Bed-Stuy is burning. I have it somewhere.
You don't need to have them both.
I don't need. Well, I do. I
I
looked
know you've
over.
I know
I
you've
read
read
them.
them, and I
I
appreciate
read them
that.
too.
I appreciate that.
Um, and what else? So, how do you describe what is it that you do? Because you do more than just this writing.
I do a lot of things. So I do a lot of things. As I spent a decade failing at publishing novels, I also acquired a wife and a couple kids during that time, and I needed to create an architecture for my life where I could continue writing novels while feeding and housing myself and my loved ones, essentially. So like I initially got healthcare by getting a job as a part-time middle school English teacher the year or two after I was your fiction and poetry teacher at Johns Hopkins. So I
Ah,
came back from Johns Hopkins. I needed a way where if I got sick, I could afford to see doctors. The only real skill I had was I could teach. I started working with middle schoolers thinking I would hate it, but I really loved it. I really enjoyed it. So like that, I've been teaching part-time middle school since I knew you initially. What was that, 13, 14 years ago?
yeah, that's right. So I think we met fall 2006.
That sounds right.
Maybe
6 or 7. Yeah,
2006, 2007, 8 or 2 years. That's how we know each other.
that's right. So I did
Started in
that, and
2008.
then I started picking up some tutoring work because there's a very I was surprised to find that among teachers there was a very small group of us who could uh, teach many different subjects. You know, like as a generalist tutor. There are a lot of very wealthy New Yorkers
Yeah.
who need assistance. I think legitimately. I only emphasize the wealthiness because that was a way that I could afford to make as much money in as little amount of time as possible, so I could dedicate the rest of my time to writing. So I was unusual in New York in that I was a classroom teacher, but I could tutor across all sort of maths and Englishes and histories and languages and sciences and all sorts of things well enough where I was credentialed and I got along with kids and I could get kids through this topic. So I stumbled into this way of making really decent money. So I taught as little as possible. I tutored as little as possible, and I wrote the rest of the time. I then I got more clients than I could take, at the same time that I was seeing that a bunch of kids in my English class were being tutored by people who didn't really have any background in education of any kind. And they were doing the work for the students, or they were, just sort of helping borderline cheat to help the kids get by. So I started at that point, the city's only tutoring company where all the tutors are professional educators. So my life has sort of progressed down three paths. There's like the teaching path, this business that I started, and what really mattered to me throughout this the most, which was sort of the literary fiction and the attempt to publish novels in the public sphere.
And are you now at a point, can you be just a professional novelist or writer if you wanted, or now maybe what you want is something different? What?
Yeah, it's a great question. Could is a really complicated word in this context, because like if I were single and living on my own, only had to pay for my own food and tiny rent, yeah, I've made enough money with my first two books that I could probably get by for a bit trying to write the third. The problem with fiction is I would need to write the book, and my agent would need to sell it for me, and there's no guarantee that it's probable that I could get another book published, but it's not guaranteed. So I couldn't. I mean, even if I were not financially responsible for other people, I don't think by disposition I could be in a place where I dedicated myself entirely professionally towards the writing of books, because that could really end at any moment. And with the health condition that I have that we can discuss or not, and with other variables, having a regular income source is important. Right now, my wife makes more money than I do, but she does it by working far, far more hours than is sustainable. So a lot of what I'm doing is trying to set up a world where my wife can take a step back from her job when she wants. I can be in a position where if I don't succeed at writing moving forward, I can still, through this tutoring business, have enough income to, be a person in the world.
Mhm. But you say you do actually enjoy teaching at that age.
I do. I love teaching at that age, but I think it's partially because I don't need to do it 5 days a week for 8 hours a day.
Mm.
I have the ideal gig where I get to set my curriculum. I can sort of teach whatever I want. They trust me. They're happy to have me there. I get along really well with 13 and 14-year-olds, and it's like performative for me. Like it's a way to be in the world and to like do my silly shtick and to get kids excited about books. And like I do it 2 days a week, and I'm part of a community, and like it's far more a hobby than a vocation at this point.
Yes, and actually, yeah, that sounds good. Okay, so I like this. I want to hear a lot about this journey of yours. I see a lot of decisions that you made that maybe I could have made. Could be teaching, could be trying to do it. You found your wife and had a family even while you were part of that struggle. And here I am thinking I need to make it before I can get there. But maybe I just want to start by asking the big question of mine is really why write? Why do you want to write? What do you want to write?
Yeah.
What are you doing here?
Yeah, it's a better question than even you know. I think I don't think art has any intrinsic value. I think that human beings are capable of this type of entertainment, which is sort of beyond animalistic. Like I think that what art can do is entertain in a deeper and more satisfying way. But in no way do I think,
With art more deeper and
than watching sports or porn or something. Like I think that there's a way that, like, if you watch a thriller or pornography or I mean, sports get complicated because there are like real narratives that people can read into them and human drama and stuff. But I feel like there is a,
And Woody Allen would say oftentimes he'd rather watch the, he'd rather watch the sporting game, the live thing, than someone's bad movie.
totally, absolutely. And I think that is the value of sports and like of gossip. Like I think that like talking about other people behind their backs and thinking about why people are acting in the way that they're acting and making either like witty and cruel or observant and kind comments about other people is sort of what I'm interested to begin with. So I choose literary fiction is what matters to me because I am interested in people and why they do the things they do, where I'm less interested in cars exploding. Like if I don't, I mean, I guess there's an implicit hierarchy of value there, but in trying to be as honest as I can, like the reason I write literary fiction is because that's what I read. That's one of the things that entertain me most. And there's an ego side of it where I feel like society, the society in which I grew up, which was a relatively academic, intellectual, we use middle class euphemistically, but like upper middle class Jewish family. I feel like I was always a good student, but I was a good student for the sake of being a good student. Like I was more interested in getting good grades than I was in the subject matter, but then that slightly shifted where in my adolescence, I got squirmy and needy and angsty like everybody else. And for some reason, writing felt like a more valuable use of my time than other things I could be doing. And as opposed to basketball, where like if I were a great basketball player, maybe that would have felt a more valuable use of my time. Like I was getting complimented for this thing that I started to show people. It felt like a good use of my time.
At 13, your writing gets complimented.
No, it's 17, 18.
17, 18. Okay.
Yeah, and there's no way to know whether I was being humored or not, because like who else was writing and showing people their writing? Like I think now that I'm at the teacher side of this, like I couldn't imagine a student coming to me with work and me not complimenting that student. So I have no idea the degree to which I was just told, like, what, of course you're going to tell a kid who's excited about writing at that age. But really what happened after that was I went to France. So I didn't get into Harvard or Yale or Stanford, which were the schools
Out of high school.
Out of high school.
And you went to one of those fancy private high schools in the city?
Yeah. I went to one of the super fancy private high schools. I went to Dalton. So I went to in ninth grade. So I grew up downtown. And I went to a local private school where everybody who applied got in. And then I was a really good student. So when I applied in ninth grade, they let me in because at that age at Dalton, like they need to balance the like ultra wealthy with like the kids who are going to be good at some stuff. And my parents could just afford to pay the tuition.
They have to do that at Harvard and Yale too, I've heard.
Right, except you don't need to be I wasn't, for whatever reason, I didn't get into Harvard, Yale, and these other schools. And but I got into Columbia, which felt like a failure at the time because I was raised in a deeply problematic, distorted, psychologically damaging way. So I figured instead of just failing and going to Columbia, I was going to take a year abroad and like make it matter. And like I don't know the extent to which I am telling my story in a self abnegating sort of critical way, or if this is actually what happened. But like either I knew I wanted to go do something more than just like I went to school downtown and then I went to high school uptown and then like to go uptown more to go to college. I was a little antsier than that and I wanted to run away, but also I was a little ashamed that I didn't succeed at getting into the schools I wanted to get into. And I'm not quite sure how to disambiguate all that, but for whatever reason.
That's consistent with my experience, but yeah. And
what, it's not consistent in your experience?
No, that is, that part. Oh. Some parts are, and some part, this part, yeah. I didn't get into schools I thought I wanted to go to, but I didn't. I don't know. I think Columbia would have been very good.
Yeah, I know, but it's all arbitrary, right? Because like Johns Hopkins is objectively really good.
It is.
And like Columbia is objectively really good.
And I love Columbia too. That's why.
So like to me, this is all psychological. Like it's all arbitrary goals which are met or are not met. But the point is that I decided to like do something grand because I don't know. So I took a year off and I spent 6 months living in Thailand in a small village and 6 months living in Paris for a while. And the idea was that Thailand was going to be this very difficult time, that I was going to test myself for the first time, and I wasn't going to live a cushy life, and I was going to teach English and live in a tiny house, and I don't know what I was imagining. And then Paris, I was going to like reward myself with, because like I spoke some French and I thought that'd be fun.
Well, I'll give you credit for doing both of those things. I don't have the, I feel I'm not brave enough to go live on my own in a country where I don't speak the language.
Yeah, but I don't think it was bravery. I think it was like, it was all controlled. It was like I knew I had gotten into Colombia. Like what could happen? Like it wasn't. It didn't. I don't know.
But isn't that funny? Isn't that weird that you thought you just, I don't know, to me, it's very impressive to me. Get into Colombia, whatever, that's great. And you go and travel and see the world and actually.
Yeah, no, it was a good decision. It was a good decision. And but what happened was Thailand was incredibly easy. I was like the only white person or whatever you call I was the only well, I don't know. What's the appropriate? I was the only non-Asian person who anybody in this village had seen or like hung out with before. And like they treated me great. So like I thought I was going into this like shack in the woods, but like they brought me to like the wealthiest person in the village's house, and we had running water and electricity, and like I taught, and I was like this like wacky teacher guy, and like it was like the mother of the house woke up early and made feasts, and like we went to all these things. It was just like it was Epcot Center. It was like it was like foreign land, and it was great. And then I went to Paris, and it was the loneliest I've ever been. I didn't realize this sort of type of loneliness existed. Like I've always been a little like by disposition homesicky. Like I never, like at summer camp, which I liked, I would cry in the beginning, and like I couldn't, like transitions were very hard because like I don't know, I grew up in a tight-knit Jewish place where everybody was telling me I was loved a lot or something. But I went to France, and it was I was 18, and I lived at with this woman who turned out to be a lovely Yugoslavian woman, but like that was my homestay. So I thought I was gonna be with like a family, but she had me sleep in her bedroom, and she slept on the kitchen floor to save money. And like I didn't know anybody there, and I couldn't communicate with her. Her French wasn't that good, and I just had so much time by myself. So I got really sad. And the two things that helped me pass time at night were I discovered drinking. There was very cheap wine at the bodega at the corner, and writing. And like I don't quite know why, but that's when I started every day like writing, and it was like thinly veiled, self-lacerating versions of myself.
I see, because I wanted to come around to this when you say even when you started writing in high school, you were already like this sort of literary fiction is what you read, that's what you wanted to write, or is it by this time?
Yeah. I never read as a kid. It was always homework, so I did it because I wanted to do the right stuff, but I didn't really like books until, I don't know, junior year of high school, maybe, when I realized I was like reading, I mean, it's all the dumb classic books, but like I remember I was assigned Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen, and like I desperately wanted to know who was going to get married to whom in like a way that it didn't really make sense. Like I was like sort of rolling my eyes at myself. I read The Great Gatsby, and I'm like, ooh, like this is some like weird shit. Like what's going on isn't really what's going on. And I liked the assigned books, and then I started reading more books by people who were like things that were assigned, or like I went to the bookstores and tried to find the books that I felt like I might like, and I don't know, I started enjoying it. I started liking to read.
How did you, but where do you go from you like to read something to like, this is something I can do and want to do?
Right. So want to and can, I think are
Two different things,
or an
maybe.
important distinction. Want to do, like, I don't know. I didn't have a lot of girlfriends. Like I didn't really date anybody for real, until my wife, like in college, until college. Like I didn't lose my virginity until deep into college. I wasn't invited to parties a lot. Like I didn't have an external life that was particularly rich. I had some close friends. So I internally I wanted to feel like things were important. So I wrote them down. I mean, I guess
Your
it was a journal.
pathology, by the way, is not as deep as mine. I just want to
Sorry, what's not as deep as yours?
your social pathology, how long it was that you went without this or that.
I'm not comparing my pathology to yours.
I have a suffering that's larger, though, so I'm just putting
Yeah,
that.
sure. Congrats on you being more pathological than I am. I'm answering your questions.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No.
This
Okay.
isn't me saying, like you, Daniel,
Yeah.
I was 20 and a half when I first made love with a woman. Like I'm not, this isn't, I, I, I,
No,
I
I understand.
appreciate
Okay,
that
I
other
understand.
people, I appreciate that other people struggle with things more than I did. That being said, the question you asked was why I started writing. And the answer
Yeah.
was because, like, my life didn't feel full or important. And I wanted to try to figure out what was going in my life. And I put words on paper. It felt like, I don't know, my thoughts mattered in a way, or
I see. I see. So it wasn't. It didn't start with the ambition to be like the, say, the novelists or have quite what they have. It's right from the experience comes the idea to write about it. Is that more like? I mean, you liked.
No, I appreciate you parsing this with me. I stopped being good at math and science when I couldn't understand BC calculus as well as other people could. It was really hard work for me and I hated it.
Uh-huh. Everyone gets off at some point.
Yeah. And about that same time, I realized that I sincerely enjoyed this other academic thing. So as I saw one path closing, another path was becoming more interesting to me. And I didn't have other skills or talents or things. I mean, I played video game, I played Sega Genesis or whatever, but like there was nothing else I wanted to do. Like I was an okay tennis player, but like I wasn't actually good.
Now people make living playing video games. Now,
right now, but I didn't have the hand-eye coordination or the obsession to do that. So I had time, and for whatever reason, I really don't know the answer to this, but I have always enjoyed the feeling of like accomplishing things more than pleasure. Like I don't like having fun that much. I realize, like I don't.
That makes sense to me. Yeah, what's fun?
I don't know, but people like it. People love fun.
I've always wanted to have this fun, but if I've done something, I'm proud of it, or to work on something great and be totally absorbed in it.
Totally.
That's life.
That's value, or that's worthwhile. But some people go to concerts and they experience ecstasy. They love it. I never do. I never did. I don't.
Not with this modern music, but I don't know.
What? Well, no, I mean, sure. I'm sorry. You have found moments of ecstasy in going to a concert?
Well, there's some great music out there. I'm pretty sure when I was a kid, or if I experienced some things that changed my life. Certainly, movies. If you're going to be a little bit more broad.
Oh, that's fair. You're right. But whenever I was with a group of people who like sought out fun, I never liked that as much as like hanging out with some friends and talking. I don't know. I'm getting slightly off track. What I wanted to where this started is that like I was at a point in my life where I started recognizing that in myself, and the idea of working on something that mattered, or that like was a goal, or not even goal oriented, but like that the time I was spending was worthwhile. That became more complicated to me, as it wasn't just like school and hanging out with my friends playing video games, because like I was too old, and not too old to just like hang out with my friends and play video games, and not old enough to have like a girlfriend or whatever else other people were doing. And I felt like for whatever reason, writing scratched that itch. Like trying to tell a story about me. I knew writing was like a valuable thing. I like to read. I knew that it might be applauded by other people if I got good at it. I can't really parse these things, but starting 17, 18, it was something that I did alone. It was that I hadn't done before, and that I have continued to do ever since then.
Like not in the form of a diary, but like what, short stories or essays?
For some reason, I was ashamed or something about it. It was a diary,
Oh,
but it was like a narrative diary. I can't. It was memoir-y, but I would make some stuff up. I mean, it's how I write now for the most part still, and I don't really know what it is about that, but I just the truth felt like there was a level of indulgence to that, even as an 18-year-old, 17-year-old, that I didn't like. I didn't like the idea of saying like, today I talked to Susan and she said this to me, but I wish she had, like, I don't know whether I wasn't able to voice it in honest words, and it was easier to have some sort of affectation associated to it. But I also I never liked reading nonfiction, so maybe that's part of it. I've always preferred made up stories to real stories. Uh, I don't know. I don't have truth has never been particularly of interest to me. Like today, it came out that Caliphate podcast was all made up. The New York Times had this great podcast. Like, so it's this woman, a brilliant, fantastic journalist, wrote all about. She somehow got inside ISIS, where she interviewed members of ISIS, and then she talked to this one guy, this Canadian guy who joined ISIS and who was like decapitating everybody and threatening children, and he talked to her about it. And I listened to this podcast, the New York Times podcast. It was really fantastic. And just today it came out that like none of it was true. And like, I don't know, like,
oh, and
who
you
cares?
don't
Like,
mind because you're fine with fiction as long as it's a good story. I remember being so angry that the plot of Slumdog Millionaire wasn't true.
sorry, so you thought that in Slumdog Millionaire,
I thought, why would they be telling this story?
The questions were all asked in the chronological order of his getting older.
Oh.
So coincidentally,
No,
you thought it was true that coincidentally, the first question related to a time when he was 5.
That's a fair.
And the
Okay,
second question
that's
related
a fair
to the
point.
time when he was 9.
I give some license, but it bothered me at the end that they would have made a story because of course you can contrive that the questions, but it would have only been interesting to me if this had been okay. Fair points. It's been a long time since I saw that movie, but
that's also that's like a shtick that I return to. I don't think I've said that for 10 years, but I do remember that being infuriating about Slumdog Millionaire. So thank you for the opportunity to return to like, it's not that I have I can do that with all movies. You just happen to walk into something I've done before.
Yeah, that's a fair point here. Although I guess the last question came back to something very early. But anyway, let's see. But so so that's actually, it's very interesting to me because I think that's much healthier that you did it for your own satisfaction. And
no, but the problem is that it leads to a terrible pathology, because it meant that I couldn't stop until I succeeded. Like, ingrained in me was this thing where not only did it have extrinsic, but it had intrinsic value. It was a part of me. It was real. It was like, so I was stuck in my late 20s, having dedicated my entire, the previous decade to this thing that I just couldn't, that I kept on failing at, that I couldn't give up. So yes, initially, I think it had more merit, but it became a sickness because of the exact origin stories that we're piecing together, where I liked it initially, I was defined by it, I was complimented for it, I then did it at college, and then I did it at graduate school, and it became, I think, far more about the life narrative and the ego part than about, you know, the way if it had been ping pong instead of, you know, novel writing.
So you kept doing it, but so when did it become your ambition as a, I don't know, for a either for a living, for
Yeah.
are you trying to be one of these great authors of all
No,
time? What are
because they
you?
all sort of strike me as dopey or unattainable. Like I am a deeply needy social person. So like that genre of author who like dies a destitute failure because of his art. Like I don't see any glamour in that. I don't
Oh, I don't want to be like that guy either. No, no.
no, no, that's fair. I don't know why I started with him. But like also like Hemingway seemed like a real like silly jackass to me always. Like I don't any of these stories I heard about authors, it all seems so dumb. Like I don't like he was like a man who believed in manliness. Like really? Like I don't know. Or like James Joyce was like he believed so much in the intellectual life that he married an illiterate woman, you know, and created his own way of writing that was separate from the rest of his life. Like I never really understood what any of these people were talking about. It wasn't far less than my wanting to emulate some person I thought of was grand, was probably I wanted to be seen as a writer. I think that if you're going to look at it in the superficial way, I think the me at my most superficial in terms of all of this would be I wanted the world to see me as a novelist. I think that would be great. That I thought that would be great. That would be a good profession, a good use of my education, intellectual life, a valuable use of my time. And I started thinking, to answer your question, that might all be plausible senior year in college, where there were serious writers around me. And I was given a lot of what I thought was sincere positive attention. You know, like I was chosen to be one of the people who ran the literary magazine that nobody read, but that's not the point. Or like I had a couple professors who were real working writers who said like, hey, like maybe you could do this, you know, in a way that was fabulously exciting to me. Especially because I like a lot of undergraduates fetishized academia, I found. And the more I thought about academia and the more conversations I had about academia, the more I realized that it didn't align with my skill set or my vision of the world, where I so looked up to these professors in the English department, but I didn't know whether one, I was smart in the same way they were, in the very precise way, or if I cared as much about the intellectual differences or something like that. Like the academy, it became clear, wasn't for me, as it became clear that I might
That's
really
probably
have,
good for you. That's probably
I
very
think,
good. Because I think there's a real danger now. I'm seeing, you know, if you're too good at school, then who are you impressing? Just the professors, and you know, you think that's the only kind of person you can be like.
right.
Now,
And then I think I think you were even more of like that than I was.
that it's what made sense to me, because I was good at math, and
Right.
that's what I did. But
Right, and you, if I remember correctly, understand correctly, are far better at math than I was than I was at anything objectively quantifiable academically.
no need to. I don't know how you didn't you. You came in the first day. You didn't you triple majored in some.
Yeah, I read a lot of books. I mean, I took a lot of classes, but like anybody, like college is easy, right? Like you can to like
I was able to do college.
to do college, you just have to really care about college
Mhm,
and be decent at it. You
mhm.
know, like the difference between my wife and my wife is as smart, if not smarter, as ambitious, if not more ambitious. But like I met her at college. We just did college really differently. She like pursued her interests, and I wanted to do really well at college.
You were wait, but I thought you said you were pursuing you had found what it was. You started writing in your year before college, and you did it throughout.
True, but I also, if I were taking a class, which I I didn't like, or if I didn't respect the professor, or if it was on Renaissance literature, which I dislike because it was a class, what is it called? A class you have to take?
Requirement.
Yeah, it fulfilled some requirement or
Distribution.
something, distribution requirement, exactly. I would still feel the need to work as hard at that and succeed and get a good grade. So it's true that I was in general, like reading a lot and writing a lot in college, but it wasn't noble in the way that maybe I accidentally made it seem. Like I still was, in retrospect, in a way that makes no sense. I was like trying to achieve in areas that just like didn't matter at all in retrospect.
Hmm. I think I approached everything with seriousness and intellectual curiosity as much as I could in college, and some other things. And that's how I ended up taking very seriously this class in sociology and education and getting an F for clashing with
Yeah,
the
exactly.
professor.
But you were, I mean, as your teacher, when you were in this state, you took risks that I never would have taken. And in
I
my,
didn't know any what I was doing or any other way.
that's
I
not,
think I was
but you knew that you were a troublemaker in a way that if I had been if I had seen that in myself, I would have been horrified by that thought. You performed a lack of caring about what other people thought in a way that that either was honest or not. I have no way of knowing. But I would have been too scared to behave in the way that you did as an undergraduate.
boy, I
And whether
didn't.
that's a
It was
good
just
quality or a bad one, I have no idea. But
no. It's very. I guess I do respect some of what I did, even though I know it comes from I just didn't know to care about other people at that stage. But
other people don't matter at that stage. I mean, I wish I had more of, part of the reason I enjoyed teaching you as much as I did, in spite of your absolute absurdity in
yeah.
much of the way you approach that, is because I wish I had more of you in me when I had been an undergrad. I wish I didn't give a shit in the same way that you didn't. Again, it's hard to actually divorce the way you didn't give a shit with the performance of not giving a shit. So it's hard to fully understand. But I found it very compelling that you are still the only student I've ever taught who took writing critiques of your classmates' works very seriously and were entirely honest about those critiques. I mean, it made you a jackass, but it made you
Yeah.
a unique type of jackass that that I found delightful.
Okay. Yeah. That's true of that class. I want to. I'm thinking of an experience I had while I was in grad school at Columbia. So I went where you went as an
Yeah,
undergrad.
we did a little reverse. Yeah.
Right. I experienced in a different way as a grad student where I was just in the math department. But something happened once that was pretty amazing. It relates to this. I was the TA for a differential geometry class, and I proctored the final exam. And this kid, I guess I'd never seen before, handed in his final exam. That's a little bit dangerous. Now I didn't attend the class. I just graded homework, but this guy handed in the test, and his answers in the beginning, they were not correct. And then he started giving answers that were not the answers to the questions. It began to be a kind of manifesto explaining why he did not know the answers to these questions. He was a guy who he is interested in stuff, and he thinks he could have gotten into this class maybe in other circumstances, but he really only attended the first day and never went again and didn't do
And
his work.
this he's narrating to you within the context of
Yes,
the
it's
final exam.
oh man, I wish I still had this, because it really was funny how he started answering these
Like you could
questions,
see him realizing that he didn't know the
realizing he
answer
didn't
and
know
was
that.
explaining himself as he was taking the test. Yeah.
Exactly. And he started to say, look, professor, I'm sorry. He didn't even know. He thought it'd be the professor he was writing to. He didn't realize that Richard Hamilton likes to go to Hawaii anytime he can, and I'm the one who reads this.
Yeah.
But he said, I guess now I'll paraphrase that this whole, it really was like a whole book length thing here, that he wasn't excited about this in the way he did. He's like, yeah, I look around the room, I see all these people filling out their tests, but they're just doing it for a grade. I know they heard the same story I heard, which is that you're an easy grader and you probably haven't given an F since the 1980s.
Telling this to the professor.
Telling this to the professor, how like the soccer trophies have ruined our whole generation. And but you're afraid of some helicopter mom or something, and all the rules and whatever. And he says these people, when I go to study with them, they don't care. They don't care about these things the way I want to care, but they don't, and so I'm not into it. And then it's going on. He gets to this point. He says, I was studying and I was talking to some girl, and I told her that I want to write a book, and she just looked at me and said, why? Like, why would anyone want to do that? And he's just, because I'm a human being with feelings, you daft cunt. Because I have something I have something to offer the world. And so in the last part,
this is all in the exam, he's telling you this.
He's on the exam, he's telling me this, and he said,
yeah.
So that's why I'm sorry, I did not learn what I wanted to learn in this class. I am getting on a plane, I'm going to Australia, and I'm not coming back, and that's the end of it.
That's a true story?
He drew a picture of himself surfing on a surfboard, and that was the test. And I think I'm a little afraid that the rest of the class, he turned it in his test a little bit early, and they might have seen me just reacting to this test. And I guess, I thought this is something pretty amazing. I understand this is pretty bold. I heard, unfortunately, that this kid did not make it to Australia, but
not a surprise.
So does this mesh with your experience of either the world at Columbia or your thoughts of writing?
I need an antecedent on the word "this" here. Does what exactly?
The views of this guy. I guess that I'm just relating to you here. As
no. So I actually feel almost the opposite of that guy.
Okay, good.
Because that guy saw something in writing as like pure and like the manifestation of honesty and like the one way that a human being is able to be most human or something, and the rest of it is just trappings and shackles from which he wants to break free. And I'm an institutionalist. Like I live within the shackles and judge myself based on them. And like, I'm not proud of that, but I just like seeing decisions that I've made along my life. Like I did well at grade school so I could go to Dalton, and then I did well at Dalton and so I could go to college, and I wasn't thrilled with how college was going to go. So I did this other weird narrative thing. And then I went to college and I did well there. And then other people like me become lawyers because like that's the next step where they can like do well academically. But my father is a lawyer and loathed every second of being a lawyer. And like the only serious conversation he's ever had with me about professions is like, don't go be a lawyer. Like do whatever you think is like a thing that you would want to spend your time doing. So then I was looking around and I don't know, like my grades were very good as an undergrad. So I was recruited to these investment banks, and I showed up at Goldman Sachs, I think it was, for a week or something. And like, I hated all those people. So like, I didn't go back to that. And like, I theoretically like wanted to be in the magazine world, but like, I went on a couple interviews and like to go
magazine, a literary,
like any magazine, like the New York Magazine or the New Yorker, who I did an interview and wasn't the type of person who wanted that job, but like anything really. But then I saw that these jobs were just like being the assistant to the next level people at these jobs. And I didn't get it. I didn't want to do that because I could make money tutoring. Like I knew that I could make money if I needed to. Like I was well educated and presentable enough that I I could tutor, or I could do a summer camp thing, or I could get a job helping a person if it was like just about paying my half the rent. So I didn't quite know what a valuable use of my life up until then might be. And writing seemed like it was the answer to all of this. It was like a natural continuum to from all of the education I had succeeded at. It was a way to be um, successful in a potentially exciting and valuable way. I did believe more in like the intrinsic value of art and what makes humans different from animals, and how I could create in a way that was useful, in a way that I believe far less now, but definitely thought of, you know, with sincerity then, and wanted to live a valuable, I wanted to spend my time doing valuable things. So I ended up writing.
Hmm. I mean, you don't have to. I certainly will also agree with the value of art. Me, I guess it made sense to be. I want to be Stanley Kubrick or Woody Allen or Tarantino or maybe some mathematician as far as my math.
But the problem is with those three people is like Woody Allen and Tarantino are fucking assholes. Like, who live crazy lives, who like I don't
Wait,
I don't
Tarantino lives a crazy life. Well, you know, everyone has. I don't. I don't have any problem with their personality. I always think, of course, I'm going to do it my way with my set of preferences. If only I had, you know,
right.
could
But
work.
I know artists who believe in their art in that way,
Mhm.
and have sacrificed a lot of what I knew I would need to be happy, is a euphemism, like functional. Like
Yes.
I get lonely. I get very lonely. Um, and I always have. And I couldn't be someone who just like, I don't feel like my work is more important than the people I'm around, in a way that I feel like a lot of these auteurs and artistic geniuses do, or at least present themselves as doing.
Well, that's not how Woody Allen would presents. You know, that he's famous for just going home at 5 because he wants to get back to his stuff. But
Right. Woody
yeah,
Allen's
yeah.
a unique case.
Um, I guess I just want to be into some, but I also wanted to be. I guess I wanted fame and fortune and all these things that came to some other people, and I never wanted to do any kind of the regular job. I somehow knew at a young
Right.
age that I didn't want the regular life.
Right. But look into that for a second, because I suffered from something similar. And do you see that as a product of being raised in relative comfort? So just the acquisition of comfort not being enough? Do you see that as a product of being complimented so often by teachers about a certain thing that the idea of just being like a normal guy would never satisfy you? Do you see this as a like, because
Those
I
are all
fight through these same
possibilities.
issues. Go ahead.
Those are all possibilities. Those possibly could have influenced me. Although I think that for me, I'm too crazy, too out of. I never wanted anything about my actual circumstances to influence, you know, who I really was. That's how I thought as a kid, anyway. No, I just wanted something more, no matter what it was that I had. I only look up. That's all. I only say this because this is just my comment to what you're saying. It's not quite what I don't know if I what I expected. I think that someone who really pursues writing at some point has to get it in their head, like, wow, like I can really do this and be great, and I won't have to, maybe I won't have to suffer so much. It will actually happen for me. Is if you don't have that feeling, how can you?
I think everything you said is right, except for the word great. I never saw greatness in me. I think that I am perceptive, like about the
Definitely.
ways, the reasons people act the way they do. And I think that that's a skill that a writer has. And I might have that, a lot of that. You know, I don't think I don't think I have a command of language that's as good, or I don't think I can manipulate the sounds and rhythms of sentences as well as some of my friends who are writers. Like the idea of greatness, I find is a young man's game. Like I think that there's a lot in like the writers who are very, very, very successful that is attributed to luck.
Yes.
I did see where I did reach a part of my professional thinking life where I'm like, I can do this. Like I am as good as I need to be to enter the lottery and have a shot at winning. I I think that that is different from what you are talking about, which is like, I am capable of bringing something to the world. Like I never saw it like that. It just,
So
it's
you
all,
don't think you have, but that last part I will defend. I guess I'm thinking some of this thoughts of greatness. You're right. This is when I didn't really understand what doing anything is really about. But yes, I feel like a writer. If you're going to be a writer. I mean, there's why write. There's also why read. Who's reading? What are you going to do that you're going to give the world that they just have that someone should read it? Why? That's also a part of it.
there's nothing I could write that's not worse than countless other books that are better.
Now that's oh the
I mean,
wait
I would
how
never
but then
say,
what then why write? You've got to have something. I know
because it's how I want to spend my time. Because thinking about how and why people act the way they do, while trying to solve the puzzle of making a novel work in terms of plot and character trajectory, and trying to hit one or two moments where I can articulate something that I have thought and felt that maybe no one else has been able to articulate in quite the same way that I'll be able to.
but that's got to be it. That's the thing, right? That's what you've got to.
Maybe. I don't know. I mean, that I think is the intrinsic value of what I'm doing, but I don't think that what I'm doing is more valuable than other comparable things, or even not comparable. I I live this great life right now. I mean, I have a chronic illness which complicates it, but like I live a relatively wonderful life where I get to spend 2 days a week hanging out with 13 and 14-year-olds and talking to them about books, which I enjoy. And I get to spend the majority of the rest of my time like thinking through psychological and intellectual consequences of premises that strike me as worth contemplating. And like, that's a great way to spend my time, you know? And like, I have these two kids who like create meaning in another way. And like, compared to being a lawyer or an accountant or an assistant to the head of MoMA, or like I don't know what jobs people do. Like I'm not altruistic in a way that dedicating my life to other people satisfies me in the way that I know it satisfies other people. I'm not financially driven up after a certain point in a way that satisfies other people. So what's left to satisfy me? And it's like this weird collection of things.
And then it's just okay. I guess I can understand. You can do it. You enjoy the process of doing it.
I enjoy the process of doing it. I enjoy it's satisfying to my ego as well, because it is very difficult to succeed at it. And I have reached at least a modicum of success. And it's that, whether it comes from internal sense of self or external people knowing about that, I can't really differentiate that so well, but I enjoy doing it. It allows me to be in the world in a certain way. It's financially somewhat remunerative. I don't know what else you want.
Well, okay. Well, let me tell you, when I loved your class, and not only did I love taking your class, and I mean, we read some other things. I've had a very, I'm not a well-read person actually, although a very scattershot set of books, huh?
Well, being well read doesn't mean anything. Like I don't. You.
Well, I'm not well in the same way that I've seen a lot of movies, and that has
Okay.
helped
Yep, that's a fair
give me
distinction.
a view of life and art that's helped explain, the world for me is in ways that my limited actual experience has not.
Sure.
Um, but when you encouraged me to go to the the MFA student readings back then at Johns Hopkins, which ended up being a real highlight of my experience there.
Oh, good.
And I heard a bunch of people read their short stories or whatever. But when I heard you give, some of your stories, man, they just color. There were things that were, registered to me that were part of my experience that I'd never heard explained in that way. I was like living it, and it was real. I actually felt something just hearing you read. And there were things that were funny, or they even inspired me when you said something about you were thinking of writing a joke story, and about everyone named Alex, and then you read a totally different story. I don't know. I had an experience. I just went home and wrote for the. I have such trouble writing myself, but that in conversation with you or hearing, I'd be inspired to just do something of my own. You had something. You were a different voice, a voice that is not in other works. That does, as you say, I think one of the main things is it does help explain why people do what they do. But there's something in their stream of consciousness, and every time something they do, it brings up a memory, and they're working out of other things. Yeah, and no one has written or gotten at that about life in quite the way you have. I mean, it can really do something. You
Yeah,
don't.
I really appreciate you saying that. I understand what you're saying, and I want to stick with you for a second, because seeing that reaction in you and in other people like you who responded to me in those moments in a real visceral way, I could feel it, and people would tell me about it afterwards, and have made me think that I had a voice or a way to, if you're gonna to talk about it cynically, you would say I figured out a way to manipulate my audience. If you talk about it in terms of uh, ability or craft, you can say I was able to tap into a storytelling manner that resonates with a certain group of people. And I don't really understand exactly what that alchemy is. But that is incredibly exciting to me. And once I did feel that I was able to touch that part of other people in a way that maybe other people in my MFA program weren't, or other people in my college class senior year or something like that couldn't. That definitely felt like a human connection that I want to be more sincere about than maybe I have been thus far. It felt like a valuable exercise to me, and a deeply human one.
I don't think. See, I don't know. I'm not inclined to say it's manipulative when it's something. It's more than just style. In your best work, you hit something even thematically. I feel like an author has to have something new to tell us, and maybe that's what I'm asking. What is it that you have that you want to tell us here?
Can't do it, and I can come around and I can do my best to answer that question. But I think it's probably, and this is a patronizing answer, but I think it's inseparable from. I think your experience seeing me read was inseparable from who you were at the time and what you were looking for, and an inability to articulate your own voice, and a transference of some form. And I think that that's all art. So I'm not at all saying that that's unique to your experience, but I feel as though I am. One thing I'm very good at is writing a piece to be performed. There's a slippery liminal space between fiction and the way I present myself I'm able to give the impression that the real me is telling these fictional stories. And that's something that for whatever reason I'm good at. And there is a little bit of manipulation in that. But even putting that aside, I feel like you confronted my work at a time where you had anxieties that were similar to mine and similar to a lot of people. But I was able to make light of those anxieties or put language to those anxieties in a way that hadn't occurred to you up until that point. And that is, I think, the power of a fiction writer, meeting his audience at the right time and place. And I'm not denigrating that. I think that is less an objective skill that I have than one that I kind of have, but really resonates if it matches up with the right audience.
Hmm. I don't know if I totally, I guess, is it all just because this is something that the other person has not been able to do themselves? Because sometimes I can appreciate things that really are not, it's not me, but I'm learning about something else I never would have tried to
But
do.
that's interesting that you say that, because that's what a lot of people say they really like about fiction. And I don't care about that. Like people love to, explore other cultures and stuff through fiction. I don't
Well,
like that.
that's very, yeah, if it's too.
I like fiction that is pretty much a way that I can, I mean, when I love this novella, Maud Martha by Gwendolyn Brooks, written in the 1920s. And like, I don't see myself as a young Black girl living in Chicago in the 1930s, but her experience living in a family, in an urban setting, being slightly out of pace with the rest of her friends, observing other people, like it resonates powerfully because it sort of glances off my life. It reflects my life in a way that I find meaningful or compelling or powerful or deeply human. I keep on coming back to, or something where she is able to, in that short book, articulate a vision of the world that corresponds somehow to mine, but lets me live it vicariously, or with a different set of vocabulary, or puts a different perspective on it, or lets me fine tune it or hone it, or something in a way that is thrilling to me, that really is thrilling. And it's a thrill not unlike the one that you said that you experienced, which I find deeply touching, and I'm grateful for in interacting with me. And it's, I think, a thrill that some people find in the Fast and Furious movies, because I really don't know, because those movies I don't understand at all, but people
Yeah.
love them. And I think that people don't think that they are driving cars quickly and want to drive cars quickly and explode, but there's like an urgency to life there that resonates in some way that many people wouldn't find reading Maud Martha, written by Gwendolyn Brooks in the 1920s about a young Black girl growing up in Chicago. I think there's more value in Gwendolyn Brooks than in whoever is the auteur behind the Fast and Furious 6, The Revenge of the Sith. But like, I think that there's
Those are different things.
are those two different things? But I find a thrill in what you found a thrill in, and that thrill I have read in Somerset Maugham, and in Philip Roth, and in Gwendolyn Brooks, and in James Baldwin, and in Dave Eggers, and the thought that I could produce that thrill for myself or for others. Yeah, there's something sincere about that you pushed me to get to, that maybe I didn't fully own in the first half of this conversation.
And that is, but it's not that you have, because some people have some kind of moral insight into the world. Some people have some
Really?
way of seeing the world. You
Really?
don't even think so?
Give me an example of a moral insight somebody has.
What
Like,
about take Woody Allen's movies, some of his best movies, all of them actually really. How would I behave in this, either in this relationship? What is a good life? What would you do? How closely do you identify with the main character, either in the Crimes and Misdemeanors or Match Point, or the trouble that they have?
He just
And a
made
lot
that
of,
movie twice and didn't think anybody would notice. I don't.
it's not quite the same, but he's come to the same theme several
Right.
times. That's true. But
That's not theme and variation. That's that. When I saw Match Point, I I realized that the people who loved Match Point among my friends were just the ones who hadn't yet seen Crimes and Misdemeanors, and the ones who thought that Match Point was just Crimes and Misdemeanors were.
I don't think that's entirely fair, but I think those are. I understand it's
Okay.
a similar
Anyway,
situation.
so what is he? What would Woody Allen say his moral vision is? It's a sort of
There isn't that you
there's an inherent meaninglessness, right? And you create your own meaning through relationships, and inherent to those relationships is a selfishness that needs to exist for that meaning to be fully fleshed out. Is that a fair articulation of Woody Allen?
I think that makes sense. That that is something that the people who think that's not the case, I think, need to learn. I think you need to see this example and study it carefully.
I agree with you about Woody Allen. I agree with Woody Allen for the most part about the world, but
then there are other works that help you to see, even in the way. I mean, I'm thinking of movies because that's the art form.
that's fine. I'm happy to talk about movies, but I want to. But Woody Allen, what's the? You think he has a particularly clear moral vision that he's bringing the people that
I can imagine. Okay, I don't know him, although I've tried to see every one of his movies and read everything that he's ever written or been written about him. But I'm just I can imagine how a person might construct a work by thinking about the problems that obsess them completely, and they actually try to work it out and think, well, this is what would happen, and here's why. Here's the to take a different example, something like Game of Thrones is morally instructive. It's teaching people all along the way. I think people, what they got as a thrill from it is like, this is how things really work. It's not the way you were trained to think about all the niceties of our post-industrial age. It's like, this is the real human life. This is what really, success or failure comes with being like this or that. It's teaching you something.
I agree that these different works of art articulate, as I said earlier, their visions of causality or the world or why things occur, and I'm all for that. I mean, I think I said it was one of the first things I said when you were pushing me in this direction, is that, like, what fascinates me is what people do and the reasons they do it, however big or small that is. And I've dedicated myself in my fiction writing life towards trying to produce answers to those questions. Where I differ from what you're saying is, if I had an answer, I would be able to write it in an op-ed for the Times or something. Like, I think
if there was a good answer, they wouldn't publish it.
Well, if we want to talk about op-ed desk for the Times, we can have that conversation. But I can't crystallize. I can't write it in 750 words. I don't know how I would articulate it. I think the best way is through fiction, which is why I'm a deep believer in the value of fiction, because I think you can portray the thoughts of individuals in a more honest way than you can in any other artistic media, really, is what I believe. But I don't have an answer. There's not some truism, some statement that can, because what you talk about Game of Thrones is almost like Hobbes, right? He's like, the men are power hungry people who will conquer one another until they're forced to stop conquering. And, like, okay.
And I wouldn't have believed it hearing it that way.
That's sort of true, but, like, it's sort of not true in sometimes. And, like, we should really talk about this with more nuance, and really, what do you mean? And, like, well, let's see how that would play out. So the idea of a truth, or of an underlying thesis, or any of this, I find that to be unsatisfying in its vast oversimplification. And that's why that's why I don't have an answer for you in terms of like, what is the engine behind all this, or what is the question that I'm trying to answer, because it's,
Well, how about this? How about this? So I could give a couple other examples of something where I see the artist. If I look at the camera style that has been developed by Terrence Malick and the way he tells a story in
okay.
this movie, The
I
Tree
don't,
of Life.
I've seen those movies, but I won't be as articulate about this as I will be about books, but go for it.
But you can see if he's doing it in such a different way. I mean, maybe I'll take a different time.
Terrence Malick is fine.
If he must come from some sense like I have this thing to tell. I've seen the way that other people tell things like this, and there's something really that's a complete failure about it. It doesn't work. It's not how I really think of my own childhood. It's not how I see the world. The world needs to experiment. I feel if I just did it a different way, if I told it with the camera way up close or moving, and shot it with an IMAX camera, then I look at the ground, because kids do that, and no one's and all around, and that's how I see things. I've never seen it that way before, so the world needs to see that. That's like an artistic inspiration, right?
Yeah, but I think the thing about novel writing is every sentence is unique to my vision. Like, where what interests me about novels in a way that other art doesn't is, one, I need a narrative to be compelled, just because I feel like I'm the sort of human being that needs a story. I want to see a human being care about something and see whether that's going to work out or not. Otherwise, I'm not interested. I get bored. So once I start from that premise, with novels, every sentence is my creating a way to see human beings and their interaction from scratch in a way that only I am able to present. So everything you just said about any director, any good director, I think is inherent to literary fiction. Literary only as it differs from genre, where you have to follow certain rules, right? Where it's possible for an author of genre fiction to distance him or herself from every sentence because it was a dark, stormy night, or whatever you want to start it. That's not my sentence. But in a way that I can tell any kind of story, you are thinking through life in the way that I think human beings do, or I do, or I feel it's important that one does. So yes, I can, but I don't think I can name that thing. I think I can, put certain terms like a hierarchy of selfishness is something that I think about when I write, where I feel like we pretend that there are good people and bad people or something in society. And really, I feel like everyone lives with a hierarchy of priorities, and that hierarchy of priorities will determine most big and small decisions that they make. And to my mind, most of those priorities are selfish, but they don't all need to be. I can explain it in this sort of general way, but I find that really making up a fake person who is somewhat based on me or someone I know, and telling that person's thought process, is a more precise way of articulating an answer to the question that you asked me earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess that's fair. I don't know what I expect as will someone be able to explain? Okay, if you could just explain the philosophy or the theme, do you need why do you write the whole book? You need that book. You can't distill it.
And one of the problems I have with postmodern visual art and some literary art is, like, you can just explain the joke, like I think putting, as an example everybody will know, like, I think putting a urinal on the wall is funny, but like, you don't really even need to put it on the wall, right? Whereas cutting a shark in half is sort of like that, except like it's kind of cool to see a shark cut in half. So I might show up and look at that, but I
don't look at anything by that guy.
but that's the thing. It's like ideas. It's like they're jokes. They're shtick. And like they can be visually impressive shtick that I would show up and look at, or just ideas that I don't really need to. But I think what a novel is, or what a film is every minute of it is itself, you know, in a way that.
Yeah, yes, that's fair. I think in a great work, I guess I want to see something and have some experience of it. And I guess I also, just as, I don't know, a thinker or a critic, I want to be able to say, what is the idea? I feel like there must be some idea behind this thing that gave something to me.
Perhaps, but it's only the word idea where I'm fighting you. You know, I think it has to be a sensibility, or it has to be a vision, or it has to be a something. But idea makes me nervous, because idea suggests that you could say it.
Well, I want to be able to say it. If I can't say it, then I don't know what I'm talking about.
Totally, and that's why this is also difficult
yeah.
to do and difficult to discuss, because it's ephemeral. It's not there until you make it, right? Like I don't know anything about math, you know, so you would have to tell me if there's a corollary at all. I think that what math can do is define the idea in a way that art can't. But that might just because I don't understand sophisticated math.
I don't know. In this place we're working, I think that, you know, definitions in something like philosophy, they're all provisional. They come from examples, and we, you know, they're characterizing properties as opposed to mathematical definitions. But
yeah.
But the two novels that you've written do address they're like political issues, right?
Yes. Yes. The first novel is about a racial uprising in central Brooklyn. And the second novel is about life under Trump and how it correlates to individual suffering.
So I think you can't totally divorce. I mean, your writing does take attitudes both of what is important, what has meaning to you, and maybe a little bit what is your view of certain things, you know, that questions that somehow are begging for an answer. And it's
so totally, but my life and my thoughts are saturated with these political elements. So it's not as though I am making political points in addition to making psychological or emotional points. It's that my life is again linked inextricably to these issues, where, like, I think if I were writing 15 years ago, before I lived in a predominantly Black neighborhood, or when somebody for my life was anodyne as our political leader, you know, Bill Clinton, when I was just some white guy, like, to write a political novel would have been an artificial decision. Whereas the places and the times in which I'm living right now, to not write a political novel would be equally artificial, because so much of my life is processed through a political lens. I mean, I read, yeah, I read. I mean, in my neighborhood, being white is the most important attribute I have when I'm alone, or when I'm with my kids, or when I'm interacting with police officers or people in my neighborhood. And my wife works for the New York Times. I read Twitter all the time, and
well, that's your choice. That's how I feel. Don't you
it's
think
my
that's
choice? I'm not blaming anybody, but it is my reality, right? So to detach from that reality is artifice in my mind. It's saying, like, I'm not a farmer on the prairie somewhere who isn't touched by all of this. Like, if I were to write about, I mean, there are farm subsidies, and we're bringing in inorganic manure, and, like, I'm sure that there are politics that are inherent to those experiences as well. But I'm saying that I'm not making a political point. I'm having politics be organic to my characters' lives.
Yeah, I think that that's when the writing is good. That's certainly what's happening.
And if that was an unnecessarily passive aggressive,
I wonder. I think that
I'm fine. I'm fine saying that to my reader. I don't always succeed. Like, I in no way think that I've written the perfect novel. I assume that there are parts where you read it and this feels like artifice to you.
I worry about the things that I understand about life, or the things that I think are important to relate in art, being subordinated to some political purpose, some
But,
I see that
but
in
the
art. I
things that
see
I
that
worry about in life are subordinated to so many purposes when I sit down and write. I mean, they're subordinated to political purposes, they're subordinated to commercial purposes, they're subordinated to, I mean, the whole idea of a plot is just like pretend. You have to, I want to be able to speak truths, right? But I'm doing it within the context of an entertainment, and that entertainment exists within the context of a publishing landscape. Like I, the purity that you would want any writer, but I think you're almost saying me specifically to aspire towards, is it doesn't exist. There is no a contextual fiction writing. So
Mm.
I'm not compelled by that argument.
Do you get that? Okay, that's actually really a little bit what I wanted. Do you have pressure put on you, say by the apparatus that publishes your novel, that makes this all happen, to do a particular thing? Uh,
No more so than I felt pressure from an audience of college kids at the Den during the reading series that I ran, to give that audience what it wanted in order to get it to hear the way I thought people behaved. Yes, I am writing for an audience. That audience is
Actually, who is your, yeah, what is your, who is your audience?
the audience is well, it depends. My literal audience is educated women in coastal cities, because like they're the people who buy literary novels. So that's what reduces what I could publish to an audience. But that's not what I think about when I write. When I write, the audience I write about are people who have similar values and priorities as I do. They're irreligious people who prioritize relationships and value in love and ego and finances and power and art. My audience is an audience who more or less shares my priorities. It's not bigger or smaller than that.
I wonder, does anyone even aspire, as it even makes sense to say, I want to take the person who's not, I don't know, not like that, doesn't share, and I want to.
Oh yeah, I think I'm in the minority right now who would admit that on a public forum such as your podcast. I think that I am, I think that most writers would, most readers, most critics would say that's why I'm not more successful. I think that I have a readership, right? I have people who enjoy my work and people who are excited to read my second novel because they like my first. But I am, as a straight white man, middle-aged man in Brooklyn.
Middle-aged.
I'm 40 next year. Yeah, I'm middle-aged. I mean, as a straight white middle-aged man, in the upper middle class, again, in Brooklyn, who's the third generation Jewish in this world, like my world isn't one that people particularly care about right now. And I think for good reason. Like it's not where the most dynamism is coming from. That being said, I think that my work is universal enough that fuck them. And I think that people will get something pure out of my work rather than my pretending otherwise. Whereas it's
Look at all these people who bought into, who suddenly yearned to go to a British boarding school and absorb this world of magic, just because this woman wrote this book. I mean,
right. I think that is a more sincere example than all of the people who are suddenly fascinated with the African immigrants experience, where I don't quite know what that's about. Like there have been wonderful African writers whom I've read for years. The African American writers haven't had access to the publishing apparatus, and I think that there's a decent argument to be made that their voices weren't amplified to the extent that they were now. But the fact that so much readership is so much of elite attention is paid to categories of writers now in a way that it was paid to neurotic Jews, a couple generations ago. It's all just how the winds are blowing. Like, it's all what is interesting to the people who run NPR and the New York Times. And like, I'm not critical of that. Like, that makes sense. Like, people cared about what Saul Bellow and Philip Roth said, and now people care about what the authors of Americana. Sorry, go ahead.
I read one book, Herzog, and it made a lot of sense to me. This angry guy who started writing letters to all the people who he felt wronged him, and that
Herzog is shtick. Herzog is fun. Herzog is an entertainment to me, in the same way that what I write is an entertainment, and in the same way that Americana, which is one of the biggest novels of the last 10 years, is an entertainment. I think it's not good or bad. It's just where the focus has come, and it probably is good, actually, because I still can have a voice now. I can still find a publishing outlet in a way that 40 years ago, Black women couldn't. So like now, if it's leaning in a way where Black women are able to tell their stories, that's probably better than more wealthy Jews or middle-class Jews. Like, I think
I'm not going to write myself out of anything. I only, like I said, I only look up. I need, I'm not ready to this identity thing that you're talking about here. I'm not buying into. I just want something out of from other authors and maybe for myself. I want to. Okay, what I was trying to ask: why should someone who's reading these books? But if you have something to say, shouldn't it hit someone? Don't you want people to hear it? What's going to make a person, even go into the bookstore or like?
Nobody's reading these books. Nobody.
Yeah. So, but does that?
But no, because what I'm doing is the same thing as what poets do or what opera composers do. It's niche. It's elite. It's self-indulgent. It's myopic. Like
How can you say? But that's not your only view of the thing that you do, though. I mean,
no. I think it has great value because it's my form of entertainment. I like it. It's not insincere. I like it. It's a genre that I like, so I do it. I don't like poetry. I don't like opera. I mean,
not even Rigoletto or
what?
Wagner. I started to like some opera.
I find some. I don't like the voice in how it's used in classical music. I find it off-putting. I don't know. I like
Maybe
a lot of Baroque and classical music. I don't like when people sing in it, and I don't really know why. And I don't have the vocabulary to explain myself very well when it comes to why I don't like the human voice in classical music. I don't know. But what I'm saying is, you want me to argue for some intrinsic merit to what I'm doing, and I believe it has one. I believe that if you read a lot of literary fiction, you get closer to the heart of what it means to be human and all that. But if you don't want to read literary fiction and you find that in opera or poetry or sitcoms or like, I don't know, that's fine.
Why do you call it, when you say literary fiction, it's just a book. All too many.
Oh, yeah, yeah, that's totally fair. I'm not literary fiction. Again, the only distinction I'm making is from genre fiction, where people who write in particular genres are doing something very different from what I'm doing. I believe that they are. You pick up a mystery, and I'm not like a literary mystery, but you pick up a mystery, and there are thousands of them are published every year, and they will continue to be. And you want a certain set of experiences in the same way that if you watch CSI Miami, you want a certain set of experiences, and you get the clues and you get the red herring and you get the detective, and it satisfies a number of beats. It's the same with romance. It's the same with a thriller. It's the same with these other things. And that I'm saying, I don't know how to do those things. But what I'm doing is if you're interested in what normalish people do and why they do it, like, that's what I'm interested in.
I see.
That's what I produce.
I mean, I've heard George Martin say, we should understand even this thing called literary fiction has its own genre convention. It's not.
100%, absolutely. But that's a little bit cheeky of George Martin saying that, because he is writing in a hybrid of genres. So he's not a science fiction writer or just a fantasy writer. He's a fantasy writer who writes, who spends as much time on character development and the logic behind these characters. I don't think he does it as well as Proust, but he does it.
Perhaps someday we should have what is actually meant by genre. This is a big thing with me. I want to.
I think genre only means expectations.
Expectations, because there are. I'm wondering, is there a definite thing that a genre is, or is this a kind of nebulous thing that we only characterize, and what characterizes these?
So I think that the more precise you get, the less satisfied you're going to be by definitions. Pretty much with everything, like, what is a poem? Like, who gives a shit, right? And the same way, like, what is a mystery novel? If you want to tell me that a mystery novel can be something else, or there's no firm line, like, I totally agree.
But I'm saying that there's some, so as you started to say, it's not a mystery. If the answer to the mystery is not one of the characters you've already been introduced to, it's something has failed, because it,
right.
You needed that, right. You needed to be able to solve it.
Right. If you read a romance and then nobody expresses any romantic interest in anyone else, then what is that? If you want to call it a romance, God bless you, but I don't see how anybody benefits from that.
All right. What about this? Didn't you write a book and it wasn't published and you were angry about it? You think someone's wrong and you're right.
Oh yeah. So I've written I've written 4 full unpublished novels.
So you have 2 published, and then there are 4 other ones?
No, wait, let me get this.
4 total?
3. I've written 3. I've written 5 total novels. Well, if you include the one I wrote in France, 6. But as a serious writer, okay. I wrote 5 novels, only 2 of which have been published. And I got an agent for the other 3, which meant that somebody worked hard without getting paid to try to get that novel published, and it didn't.
It still wouldn't happen. You believe in it. The agent believes in it.
Yeah.
You can't get one of these people who you can't get, like,
one of these gatekeepers. Yeah.
And who are they? Like this, like Elaine's character from Seinfeld. These other people who also thought they wanted to be writers, and then they didn't, and all they can be is a literary editor.
Didn't she work at like a catalog? Didn't she?
Later.
Oh, is that true? I don't remember when.
In the beginning, she worked for some Pendant Publishing.
Oh, is that true? I didn't remember that. I only remembered when her adventure.
For the J. Peterman catalog.
J. Peterman, yeah. No, so these are for the most part, they are English majors.
Yeah.
Right?
Like you.
for a very long time, there were English majors who could afford to be subsidized by their parents out of college because the entry-level jobs paid less than subsistence wages. So it's starting to change now, but for a very, very long time, I think a reasonable critique of the publishing world was that you had to come from money in order to afford being the assistant to the assistant, and then later on the associate, and then the assistant, and then the agent. But yeah, there are a whole bunch of people who work in Midtown and downtown New York City who more or less determine what America reads.
And what do you think was what was the reason?
There wasn't an obvious audience for my work. I mean, I still think there's not an obvious audience for my work, but
Yeah.
I got an editor to really believe in me for these two books. That's part of what I was saying earlier. That's part of the reason why there's no guarantee that I'll get a third novel. I'm publishing a book in March called Taking the Stress Out of Homework, which is just like helping parents help their kids do homework, because like that's another thing I know about. And I'm going to be writing a weekly column for The Atlantic where people write.
That's actually just help. It's not a novel.
No, it's pure, just like I'm writing a weekly column for The Atlantic coming up, helping people with homework. Like I know that I am an acquired taste, and I got lucky that I have a spectacular agent who is willing to represent me, and that she finally convinced the spectacular editor at Simon & Schuster to publish my work.
Why are you an acquired taste? It came very naturally to me. It makes sense. It makes a lot of sense. I think it's just.
Yeah, but you're not someone who's going to go acquire fiction for publishing houses for a living.
No, I've always thought I should be the one making all kinds of green lighting decisions for movie studios, but no one will let me do that anyway. I just think.
I guess I mean everybody's an acquired taste. I don't fit into any obvious category, and therefore, when I came forward and I had a literary novel about summer camp.
What does the good stuff fit into some category? Why should it?
Nobody knows. I mean, the publishing houses guess wrong and then get major hits every once in a while, and like that's the way their business model works. But I don't understand really the way publishing works, because the type of book I write makes money so infrequently for the publishing house that I sort of think it's almost a way to justify the fact that to the individual that they're publishing all this other stuff that does make money. Like, these are serious readers and serious thinkers who went to school and majored in English and like reading books. And they want to discover someone like me who can.
They must think though that has somewhat that it's going to change their lives somehow. I mean, hasn't a book could actually do this for someone, could make them see or experience the world in a different way.
Yeah, and I've had people come up to me and say that, and that's immensely rewarding and really spectacular.
And then,
I really like that. I just don't pretend that is pretend is too ugly a word. That's why I don't lead with that. I don't say I'm doing it for that, because that's so rare.
It's rare. People rarely read books. You got to get
right. And the truth is, I'm having even if we just talk about the effect that you are describing, I am far more successful as a teacher than a writer doing that. I will fundamentally affect people's lives and vision of the world, more people. And even if 10,000 people are buying my book, and how many of those are reading it, and how many of those are reading it to the end, and how many of those are enjoying it, and how many of those are touched by it, we're getting into double digits, right? Where I think I can, in a literature class, or hanging out with 13-year-olds, 14-year-olds, really probably do a decent job of changing all of their lives in a small way.
like I said,
Which is why my goal isn't to change people's lives. It's to be a professional novelist.
boy, that maybe that's a clear difference. For whatever reason, all I have may not have talent. I just have ambition. I just want. I just think, you know, hey, look, George Martin got somehow like a lot of this world, all these progressives to learn about the world of medieval inheritance, and they care about how this whole thing works. I don't know why they haven't learned some lessons like that's the real world, and even in the world today. But that got people reading because he had something to tell us. I feel that that's the reason. It's not just that it was some genre thing that, I don't know.
Yeah, he's a combination of a very talented writer who hit a nerve and was marketed very well. I mean, but I think that that's the same with Lin-Manuel Miranda and J.K. Rowling's, whatever, the lady from the Harry Potter books. Like, there exist very talented, popular writers who get people to consider things differently, but I can name like 4, right, who are working today. Like, I can name those 3 and maybe Jonathan Franzen at a tiny, 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 tiny level. But really it's George R. R. Martin, it's Lin-Manuel Miranda, and it's
I don't like that.
it's fine, you don't have to, but so many people do, right? And then there's the Harry Potter lady. And other than that, can you, like, who else? If
I mean, there are other popular writers. Stephen King is still writing, and they makes
yeah, Stephen King's another one. You can include him.
And you don't.
And by the way, everybody else is writing in genre, right? Like, everybody else on that list are writing where they are giving popular audiences what those audiences expect. With Stephen King, still all his books are a little scary, and there are dragons and princesses in the Game of Thrones books. Like,
that's not what makes it good. That's not what makes it good.
No, it's not what makes it good, but
dragons and princesses.
It's what means there is a built-in audience for it.
That's such a shame. It's like you have to do it's total, you know, for years when people said, oh, you'll like this Game of Thrones, and I'm like, why? And they, oh, it's this fantasy about the, you know, they didn't give me any good reason why. Right. And as far as I knew, I don't give a damn about that.
Totally agree. I totally agree.
And when I go to a bookstore, which is almost never now, but they have the table of the new novels, and they have a little card that says, you know, what is this thing? You know, I don't care. You know, what is this going to do to me?
I totally agree.
And that's only my challenge to you. And I feel like you could do this, and that's, what are you going to put, what's going to be, I don't know, on that card.
But the problem with what you're saying is you're talking about a publicity problem. You're not talking about an art problem. And
well, it's got okay, some of it's publicity, but some of it has to be, what is this going to tell? Why should someone read what you have to say is all I'm asking, all I'm putting out there.
Because I'm hoping that I will create that I will tell the story of human beings in a way that makes them thrill, in the way that you talk about being thrilled by my getting to the core of what makes these human beings behave in the way that they behave. And that's not much of an elevator pitch, you know?
Well, you're talking about the thing. Maybe you come back to me with like a thesis of why people behave, why they behave.
Right. And if I had that thesis, I would put it in a paragraph and publish it in the New Yorker.
I see. No. The book is better. The book is definitely better.
The book is better. The problem is how do you, where do you go from there? You know, it's why I'm writing novels.
I see. So what? Okay, is there anything else you want to tell now? My what little audience? Someday I'll have a bigger audience. If you want to pitch your next thing, or tell people why they should read I don't know, one of your
Sure thing.
existing books or
So
something?
just out in paperback is The Body Politic, published by Simon & Schuster. If you want a real sense of what the last 5 years were like to be an American who suffers and endures, check it out. And if your kids make your life crazy in the afternoons because homework is really hard, in March, Taking the Stress Out of Homework by Penguin Random House will hit all the stores near you.
Hmm. Just, are you pro homework? There's a big anti-homework.
Yeah, I think that homework for the sake of homework is obviously ridiculous and a waste of time. But in order to perform any useful intellectual exercise, the 40 minutes allotted to class time is not going to be enough. So you need to do the reading at home to discuss the book in school, and you need to be able to be on your own, inside your own mind, thinking through the repercussions of literature to write an essay. Like I think homework for the sake of teaching people how to do homework is not useful. Homework for the sake of exercising people's brains, not under the gaze of one's teachers and classmates, is necessary.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on this
Daniel,
show.
as always, I really get a kick out of chatting with you. You're the best.
Okay, well, I'll take that. You are very good too. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye.
Bye-bye.